He promised they'd be waiting right at the gate. "We'll all be there to greet you. The kids miss you so much." But when I walked out into arrivals, dragging my little red suitcase behind me, there was no one, no waving hands, no familiar voices, just the noise of other people's families. I stood still for a moment, pretending I was just giving them a minute. Maybe they were parking. Maybe they'd appear at any second. But 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I looked at the big screen with flight numbers, then at the benches, the sliding doors, the escalators. Everyone else seemed to have someone. I was the only one standing alone. I didn't cry. I've stopped crying over things like this. I just walked slowly to the information counter and asked for directions to Lost and Found. The woman there looked at me kindly. I suppose I looked like someone who needed kindness, and handed me a form to fill out. I left the gifts there. The hand-knit scarves for the twins, the music box I'd carried on my lap the whole flight so it wouldn't break, the little pouch of caramels for their mother, even though she never liked me. Then I asked where to find a taxi. The driver was silent. I was grateful for that. I didn't want to explain anything. I watched the city roll past outside the window, the billboards, the unfamiliar streets, the sudden rush of traffic, and thought about how long it had been since I'd last visited. 3 years. The last time, the youngest was still in diapers. Now they're in school. At home, my son had insisted, "You must come. They miss you. It's not the same without you." But I think I knew something was wrong when he hadn't called all week to confirm. When I texted him from the gate before boarding, "Excited to see you all. Just landed." There was no reply. Still, I waited. Still, I hoped. I gave the driver my address, though it wasn't mine anymore. It was their house now, the one I'd helped them buy after Jim died, when I sold the condo and moved into the retirement place. My gift, they called it. But somehow it had become their possession, not their home for me. When we pulled up to the driveway, the lights were off. A motion sensor lit up the porch. No one waiting outside. No notes on the door. I didn't even try the bell. I told the driver, "Keep going." He asked where. I said, "Back to the airport." He looked confused, maybe even worried, but he didn't ask questions. I sat there quietly the whole way back, the little red suitcase now heavier than it had been. I thought about calling, but didn't. What was there to say? That I was here? That I came like they asked me to? That I'd stood like a fool among strangers, waiting for someone who knew I was coming and simply didn't show up? Back at the airport, I sat on one of the cold plastic chairs near baggage claim, watching people come and go. A baby cried somewhere behind me. 2 teenagers laughed and hugged their father. My phone buzzed once. Then again, a message. "Got caught up. Hope you made it home safe. Sorry, everything got crazy with the kids. We'll call later." That was it. No apology, no explanation, not even a voice, just words on a screen. I didn't answer. Instead, I got up, picked up my suitcase, and walked to the information desk again. "Can I leave a note for Lost and Found?" I asked. "Of course," the clerk said. "What should it say?" I wrote slowly, carefully. "For the Thorns. Red bag. Gifts inside. Left behind." Then I called a different taxi. One that would take me home. Not to them. To me. The house was still dark when I got back. My neighbor's porch light blinked on for a second as I passed. Motion sensors again. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and stood there for a while without turning on the lights. The silence was thick. Familiar. I knew it would be like this. I just hadn't thought it would hurt so much. I put the kettle on. Not because I wanted tea, I didn't. But because the whistle, when it finally came, would remind me that something still answered when I called. While I waited, I opened the coat closet. There was still a dent in the wall from where Jim once leaned his golf bag too hard. I never patched it. He was never a good golfer, but he loved the idea of it. I ran my hand along the edge of the wall and then closed the door. The tea went cold in the mug. It was nearly midnight when I checked my phone again. One more message had come in, this one longer, from my daughter-in-law, or rather, from her number. "Hi, Bernice. Sorry today didn't go as planned. The kids had a meltdown and Jim got pulled into a work thing. We thought you'd take a cab to the house. Maybe we missed each other. Hope it wasn't too rough. Let's touch base this weekend." Touch base. Like I was a client. I turned the phone off. The next morning, I didn't unpack. I just left the suitcase by the door. The things inside no longer had a destination. I stood at the kitchen window watching the wind knock leaves off the elm tree. There was a time I would have called someone, one of the women from the community center, or maybe my sister, if she were still alive. But over the years, people disappear. You don't even notice when the phone stops ringing. You just realize one day that silence is all you have left. Around noon, the landline rang, a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call came through. This one I did recognize. My son. I stared at the screen until it went dark again. He didn't leave a message. Later that afternoon, I finally opened the suitcase. I put the small red sweater I'd knitted on the back of the couch. The pink storybook, the one I'd read to Ellie when she was 2, I placed back on the shelf. I'd brought it to read to her little sister. The plastic bag of bath toys, still with the price tag, I tossed into the closet. I didn't cry. I just sat down and looked at the room. Nothing in it had changed. The same dusty framed photo of Jim in his uniform. The same chipped mug by the sink. The same quiet hum of the old refrigerator. It was all still here. I was still here. But the center had shifted. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept hearing echoes, real or imagined, of my son's voice. The boy who used to bring me dandelions in chubby fists, who used to ask me to check under his bed for monsters, who used to cry when I left the room. And now, he left me in an airport without a word. In the morning, I opened the cedar chest in my bedroom. Inside were old photo albums, letters, and, at the very bottom, the leather notebook Jim had given me when I turned 60. "For when you finally start writing," he said, laughing. I'd never used it. But now, I opened it. I wrote only a few words at the top of the page. Today, I stood at the gate alone. No one came. I went home without them. Then I closed it. In the afternoon, the phone rang again. I didn't pick up. Not the first time. Not the second. On the third ring, it stopped. I made a sandwich I didn't finish. Opened a book I didn't read. The pages blurred. Not from tears, just from the fog that comes when something in you begins to shift but hasn't yet landed. It was late evening when I got another message. This time from the oldest grandchild, Ellie. She's 9 now, old enough to text from her iPad. The message was short. "Grandma, Mommy said you are mad. Paul's come back. I miss you." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed, "I miss you too, darling." I didn't send it. I just let the screen dim slowly in my hand. Not yet. The next morning, I didn't open the blinds. There was no reason to, really. Light wouldn't change anything. The house would still be empty. The suitcase still by the door. The kettle still cold. And the silence. That same deep, honest silence. would still hang in the corners like it always did when the truth finally made itself known. By mid-morning, I checked the messages again. There were 4 now. 1 from my son, 1 from her, his wife, and 2 from the little one, all misspelled and too sweet to have been written without coaching. I read them slowly. Then again. They had that clumsy tone of people trying not to say too much. No one said the word sorry. No one asked what I'd felt at the airport. No one offered to come over. Just words. Filler. One read, "We were thinking we'd swing by tomorrow if you're around. Thought maybe dinner?" Swing by, like I was a gas station. I didn't answer. Instead, I went out. First time in days. The air was colder than I'd expected, sharp at the edges, like it had been waiting for me to come outside so it could remind me I was still alive. At the corner store, the young man behind the counter smiled at me like always. "Haven't seen you in a bit, Mrs. Daly," he said. "I've been away," I replied. "Vacation?" "No," I said. "Something like the opposite." He didn't ask more, just nodded and handed me the receipt. I bought tea bags, some milk, and a small bouquet of daffodils. I don't usually buy flowers for myself, but today I did. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed to remember that I could. Back home, I put the daffodils in a jar and set them on the windowsill. They didn't brighten the room, but they did change it. Just a little. I made the tea and sat down with the leather notebook again. This time, I wrote more. He used to hold my hand when we crossed the street. Now he won't meet my eyes. He used to run to me at the school gate. Now I wait at the airport alone. I paused. Then, maybe he thinks I'll always be here, like wallpaper, like background. Maybe he thinks love is like a savings account, always available when needed, never needing deposits. The next sentence came slower. But I'm not a savings account. I'm a person. I have a name. I have a limit. I closed the book and set it aside. That evening, I got a phone call from the lawyer's office. A man named Harris, young voice, polite. "Mrs. Daly, just following up on your last visit. You mentioned reviewing some documents, updating your file." "Yes," I said. "I think it's time. We can schedule something for next week." "No," I said. "I'd like to come in tomorrow." He hesitated. It was Friday, but agreed. I could hear the clicking of his keyboard as he slotted me in. After the call, I stood by the window for a long time, watching the light drain from the sky. Street lamps flickered on one by one. My neighbor came home, carrying groceries. A couple walked past, their arms brushing. Life went on, around me, without me. I wondered if that's what my son wanted, for me to quietly fade. Not gone, just less visible. Not a problem, not a priority. Something vague to be managed. But I've never been vague. I've never lived softly. And I'm not going to start now. The phone buzzed again late at night. Another message from her. Long. Too long. It started with, "Look, I know things didn't go the way we wanted, but," and ended with a request. Always a request. "We were hoping you could help with Ellie's school registration. It's complicated and Jim's slammed at work, and I'm juggling the twins. Just need a signature, really. Quick thing, let me know." Let me know, as if there had been no airport. As if there had been no silence. As if nothing had happened at all. I stared at the screen. Then I got up, walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out into the cold night air. I didn't go far, just to the sidewalk. But I stood there for a long time, staring up at the stars, not wishing, just remembering who I was. The lawyer's office smelled like old carpet, and eucalyptus. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, my coat still on. It wasn't cold inside, but I wasn't staying long. Mr. Harris, early 30s, sharp part in his hair, the kind of man who called you ma'am but never looked quite sure how old you were supposed to be. Clicked through something on his screen. "So," he said, "you wanted to review your current file, particularly the beneficiaries?" "Yes," I said, "and make changes." He blinked once, then nodded. "Of course. Just to clarify, this is for your primary will, yes?" I nodded. He turned the monitor slightly so I could see. "As of now, your son is listed as sole beneficiary, with a secondary clause directing funds to the grandchildren should he predecease you. You also have a durable power of attorney document in his name, effective immediately." "I'd like to revoke that," I said. He looked up. "I want full control reinstated immediately. No shared access, no co-signature rights." "I see," he said quietly, tapping a few keys. "And the beneficiary?" I didn't answer right away. The words had weight, but I'd already carried them all the way here. "I'd like to remove him." "All right. And I'd like to name a different primary. My granddaughter, Eleanor Daly." "She's 9. Is that a problem?" "No," he said, already typing. "We'll just structure it as a living trust in her name. You'd retain control until your death, or unless otherwise directed. We can also add a clause for education and housing expenses should you wish the funds to be used that way before she turns 18. I nodded. That sounds good. The rest was procedural: paperwork, signatures, brief explanations. But something changed in me with each document I signed. Not anger, not revenge, just a quiet correction of what had gone wrong. An hour later, I stepped out of the office into the afternoon sun, squinting at the brightness. I hadn't noticed how warm the day had gotten. I stopped at a bakery on the way home, bought a small loaf of sourdough and a tiny chocolate tart. The girl behind the counter smiled and said, "Treating someone special?" "Yes," I said. "Myself?" She grinned. "Good. About time." At home, I opened all the windows. The air smelled like something new, like fresh paint, like pages being turned. I didn't check my phone until evening. There were more messages, from both of them now. My son's tone had changed, less casual, more clipped. "Mom, we need to talk. There's been some confusion. Please answer." Confusion. That word again. As if I'd misunderstood. As if I'd imagined the silence, the empty gate, the casual way they'd erased me from the story. I put the phone on the counter and left it there. Instead, I made soup, cut thick slices of the bread, lit a candle on the table, not for romance, not for memory, just for warmth. Then I sat with the leather notebook again. He says it was confusion, that I misunderstood, but grief is rarely mistaken. It knows its name. I wrote until my hand ached. Then I closed the book and sat with my tea, watching the candle burn low. Later, as I washed the dishes, I thought about all the things I'd paid for over the years: the down payment on their house, the twins' daycare fees, the dental work, the last-minute vacations I was asked to help fund just this once. Always just this once. I didn't mind the money. Not really. What I minded was how invisible it had made me, as if generosity made you disposable, as if giving and vanishing were the same. The phone buzzed again, this time a call. I let it ring out. Then another. Finally, a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I walked into the living room, turned off the lights, and stood there a long while, letting the silence settle again. This wasn't vengeance. This was the beginning of something else. something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Choice. Saturday came with rain, not the gentle kind, but the steady gray curtain that blurs the world outside your window and makes everything seem further away. I let it fall. I didn't close the blinds. I just watched it. The way it moved down the glass like it was in no hurry. The messages had stopped by morning. That, somehow, felt worse than when they were still coming. Silence meant they'd shifted tactics. Maybe giving me space, maybe assuming I'd come around, maybe just waiting to see if the money stopped too. They didn't know it already had. The lawyer had promised a confirmation letter by Monday. The trust account for Ellie would be formalized. Everything else, the documents they never thought I'd touch, were already in motion. It was all happening. Quietly, efficiently, without discussion. Around noon, I went to the closet. I hadn't worn that sweater in over a year, the dark green one with the heavy buttons. Jim used to say I looked like a schoolteacher from the old movies when I wore it. The stern kind, he'd say, but the kind you secretly root for. I liked that. I put it on, tied my scarf, and went to the community center. I hadn't been there in months, maybe longer. The receptionist recognized me right away. "Mrs. Daly," she said, "we've missed you." "I've missed me too," I said, and surprised myself with it. I signed up for 2 classes, memoir writing and water aerobics. The first was familiar, the second, less so. I hadn't worn a bathing suit in decades, but that didn't matter. What mattered was doing something that didn't involve waiting for someone else's approval. When I got home, the phone was flashing. A missed call, then 2 more. 1 voicemail. I didn't check it. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a letter, on real paper, with a pen. "Dear Eleanor," it began. "You're probably too young to understand everything that's happening. That's all right. Some things aren't meant to be understood right away. But I want you to know something. I love you. Not because you're polite. Not because you remember to call. But because you see me." I paused. When people stop seeing someone, really seeing them, they start to make decisions on their behalf. They assume. They rearrange. They forget to ask what matters. I folded the letter and placed it in an envelope. I didn't seal it yet. Maybe I'd add more. That evening, as the rain finally stopped, I stepped out to the porch. The streetlights had come on early, pale yellow halos in the mist. I sat on the top step, listening to the soft hiss of tires on wet pavement. That's when I saw the car. His car. It pulled up slowly, uncertain, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. The engine idled for a moment, then shut off. My son stepped out. He didn't have an umbrella. His coat was thin. He stood there, hands in his pockets, staring up at me like he wasn't sure what came next. I didn't move. "Mom," he said, "can I come in?" I looked at him for a long time. Then I stood, walked inside, and left the door open behind me. He stepped in slowly, as if expecting something to jump out at him, like the hallway itself might scold him. I didn't speak, just walked to the kitchen and poured a second cup of tea. No sugar, no honey, just hot and quiet. He followed, stopping in the doorway like a guest in someone else's house, which, in a way, he was. "Thanks," he said, taking the cup without sitting. The clock ticked. The heater clicked on. The silence between us had a shape now, not empty, but dense. He cleared his throat. "Mom, I didn't know you were coming in that early. I thought maybe you'd land later. You promised to meet me at the gate." He flinched. "I know, It was chaotic. The twins were acting up and... He looked down at the tea, then back at me. I'm sorry. The words sat in the air for a moment. They didn't sink in. Just hovered there, like they were trying to find the right place to land. I sat down at the table. He didn't. I didn't mean for it to happen like that, he said. It wasn't deliberate. We just got caught up. He nodded slowly. Yeah. I looked at him. The man in front of me was in his 40s now, with gray at his temples and lines near his eyes. He used to run to me when he scraped his knee. Now he stood like someone caught outside a closed door, unsure whether to knock. You know, I said. I sat there, at the gate, watched every family walk by. Thought maybe I'd missed you. Maybe you were parking. Maybe you were late. He said nothing. But you weren't late. You weren't coming. I know. And you didn't call. Not then. Not until hours later. I didn't know what to say. You could have said that. He sat down slowly across from me. I've been thinking, I said, about the difference between being forgotten and being left behind. They're not the same, you know. Being forgotten is a mistake. Being left behind is a choice. He looked ashamed, but still tried. It wasn't a choice like that. It wasn't cruel, Mom. It was just inconvenient. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I took a sip of tea. I'm not angry, I said. That surprised him. I'm tired, I added. Of hoping, of waiting, of letting myself believe I still had a place in something you already restructured without me. Mom, that's not fair. Fair? I smiled gently. Do you know how much I've given you? Over the years? Not just money, time, patience, room to be whoever you needed to be. And I never asked for much. Just a place. Just a little space in your life that didn't feel like charity. He lowered his eyes. I came to see you. I came to see the kids. I brought gifts. I brought stories. I brought love in my hands. And you didn't even come to the gate. His voice was smaller now. It wasn't right. I know that. And I'm scared I've messed it up too much to fix. I looked at him for a long time. Then I said, That's not up to you. He raised his head. It's not about what you want to fix. It's about what I want to keep. I stood, walked to the counter, and picked up the envelope I'd left there. The letter to Ellie. He didn't ask what it was. I held it in my hand like a weight I'd decided not to carry anymore. Then I said, It's late. You should go. He stood, unsure, like a man waking from a dream he hadn't realized was a nightmare. I'll call, he said. You can try. And I closed the door behind him before the rain could follow him in. The next morning, the rain was gone. The sky was washed clean, like a sink finally rinsed after a long night's meal. The quiet was different today. Not hollow, not bitter. Just quiet. I made oatmeal and stirred in too much cinnamon, the way Ellie likes it. Then I sat down at the table and ate it slowly. It didn't taste the same, but that wasn't the point. My phone stayed silent all day. I didn't mind. I spent the afternoon going through the old trunk in the guest room. Inside were things I hadn't touched in years. Newspaper clippings, postcards from Jim's business trips, a red scarf I'd knitted when I was pregnant the first time. My hands remembered it before my eyes did. The loop of each stitch was familiar, like an old song coming back after decades. At the bottom of the trunk was a bundle of thank you cards, most unsigned, some from neighbors, one from Ellie, scrawled in pencil, backwards letters. Thank you for the books. You're my best friend, Grandma. That one I read twice. I added it to the same folder where I kept the new trust documents. Not because it was legal, because it mattered. In the evening, I sat at the desk and wrote another letter. This one wasn't for Ellie. To whom it may concern, it began, like something formal, even though it wasn't. If you're reading this, then you know I've made some changes. Financially, legally, personally. These weren't done in anger. They were done in clarity, in response to behavior I can no longer excuse. I paused, then wrote, "There is no obligation between parent and child to maintain a relationship once dignity has been removed from the table. Love is not automatic. It's not a debt or a favor. It's a daily choice, and it should never have to beg." I didn't sign it. Some things are more powerful unsigned. The next day, a package arrived. No note, just a box with a few of the gifts I'd left behind at the airport. The scarves, now wrinkled. The music box. One of the bath toys. It felt like a gesture. Maybe guilt? Maybe a silent offer to wipe the slate clean. I didn't return the box, but I didn't open it either. I just slid it under the coffee table. That afternoon, I walked to the park. There were children playing, a couple walking their dogs, and an older woman reading on a bench. I sat beside her without asking. She didn't look up. After a few minutes, she said, "You're the lady who used to run the community newsletter, aren't you?" "I was," I said. She closed her book. "My name's Carla. I used to read your columns. You always wrote like you were talking to someone you missed." I smiled. "Maybe I was." She nodded. "Well, you made a lot of us feel seen, even on bad days." We sat a while longer. No need for introductions. Sometimes women our age don't need the whole backstory. We can read pain like Braille. "Before I left," she said, "if you ever feel like writing again, I run a local blog. Nothing fancy. But your voice would matter." I told her I'd think about it. And I meant it. That night, I lit a candle and placed it next to the leather notebook. I didn't write anything new. I just read the pages again, one by one. Every line like a step out of silence. When I got to the first page, I wrote one more thing. She wasn't bitter. She was just done pretending it didn't hurt. The phone rang on Monday morning. I let it ring twice before answering, not out of spite, just to remind myself I didn't owe anyone urgency anymore. "Mom," he said. His voice was different, not soft, not angry, careful, like someone rehearsing their lines. "Hi," I said. I wanted to check in, see how you're doing." I looked out the window. The daffodils were still alive. One petal had curled at the edge. "I'm fine," I said. Long pause. "Listen, about everything that happened, I know." He exhaled like he was about to launch into a speech, but I cut in before he could start. "You don't need to explain," I said. "I was there. I want to make it right." "That's the thing, Jim," I said. "You can't make something right if you still think you didn't really do anything wrong." He was quiet. "Did you know Ellie wrote me?" I asked. "No," he said cautiously. "She didn't tell me. She said she missed me, that's all. Just 3 words. No excuses, no fixing, just honesty." He didn't reply. That's what I needed. Not big apologies, not performances, just the truth. "I didn't think you'd react like this," he said finally. "That's because you stopped seeing me," I said gently. "Not out of malice, just convenience. I didn't mean. I know you didn't. That's what makes it worse." Silence again. Then, "So where do we go from here?" I didn't answer right away. "I'm still thinking about that," I said. He sighed. "I get it." Before he hung up, he added, "I'll tell Ellie you said thank you." I didn't, but I let him think I did. That afternoon, I went to the community center. The writing class had started without me. A dozen women, most with white hair and stories written in the folds of their skin. The instructor looked surprised. "You joining us, Mrs. Daly?" "Yes," I said. "I think it's time." We sat in a circle and read a prompt aloud. "Write about a place you used to love but no longer visit." Everyone began scribbling. I stared at the blank page for a long time. Then I wrote, "Arrivals, Gate 9, where I used to expect someone to come for me." I didn't share it out loud. Some things you write just to survive the remembering. After class, a woman named Ruth walked beside me to the parking lot. "You're new," she said. "But not new. "I've been away," I said. She nodded. "I figured. You've got that look. Like someone who just came back from somewhere they didn't want to leave." We stood by our cars. "Ever want to just drive and keep going?" she asked. "All the time," I said. She smiled. "Well, if you ever do, I make a mean thermos of coffee and a good playlist of sad songs. I'll keep that in mind." When I got home, the house smelled like itself, like old wood and tea bags, and something warm that wasn't food. I changed into my thick socks and made toast. The phone buzzed again. A message from Ellie. This time, a photo. Her holding the scarf I'd made. "I love it. It smells like you." I sat with that message for a long time. Then I texted back. "You'll always have that smell, darling. It's called love." It was strange how quickly a life could shift by inches, not with earthquakes or fireworks, just with a series of quiet decisions. No announcements, no confrontations, just the kind of changes that made silence less painful and solitude feel less like punishment. The next few days passed like that. I woke earlier, moved with more intention. I didn't fill the hours with chores or noise. I just gave them back to myself. On Thursday, Ellie called. Not a text this time. Her little voice on the phone, breathless like she'd run to ask permission. "Grandma, can I come over this weekend? Just me, not them." It took me a moment to answer. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." She didn't ask why I paused. Children her age don't need full explanations. They feel the space where words used to be. She just said, "I miss your tea." "You'll have it," I said. "With extra lemon, like you like." When I hung up, I went to the cupboard and made a list. Not for shopping. For things she liked. Cinnamon toast. That green mug with the chip on the rim. The blanket with clouds on it. A storybook I hadn't read in years. I didn't make lists for her parents anymore. Friday came. No calls from Jim or her mother. I expected none. They were giving me time, I imagined. Or perhaps hoping I'd tire of my silence and return to my old role. Giver, fixer, available. But I wasn't available anymore. That afternoon, I swept the porch, watered the daffodils, and laid out the worn board game Ellie liked. The one with the missing die we always replaced with coins. I made the tea before she arrived, just to fill the house with the smell. When the knock came, it was soft. Ellie stood on the porch in a too-big coat and sparkly shoes, her backpack dragging on the ground. I opened the door. She looked up, unsure for a moment, then launched into me with the kind of hug only children can give, all heart and weight and forgiveness. "I told them I was going," she said, matter of fact. I didn't ask. I stroked her hair. "Good." Inside, she kicked off her shoes and walked straight to the kitchen. The green mug was waiting. She grinned. "I missed this," she said, taking a sip and wrinkling her nose. "Still too much lemon." "I remember," I said, pouring in more honey. We played the board game. Twice. She cheated the way kids cheat, obviously, clumsily, with glee. I let her win. Then I let her lose. Then we laughed. Later, sitting on the couch, her head in my lap, she asked, "Grandma, why don't they want you around?" I didn't answer right away. "It's not that they don't want me, Ellie," I said softly. "They just don't see me the way you do." She looked up. "How do I see you?" I smiled. "Like someone who still matters." She was quiet a moment, then said, "You're my favorite grown-up." I felt something loosen in my chest. "I love you too," I whispered. That night, she fell asleep on the couch under the cloud blanket. I didn't move her. Just sat there beside her in the dark, the only light from the street lamp outside, and listened to her breathe. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I'd been left behind. I felt chosen. Morning came slowly, as if it knew we needed more time. Ellie was still asleep when I woke, one arm flung over her face, the blanket twisted around her legs. I didn't wake her. I just stood there for a moment, watching the rise and fall of her breath, remembering what it was like to have small children in the house. That soft chaos, that weight of being needed. I made breakfast quietly, toast, apples, and warm milk. When she shuffled into the kitchen, hair a mess and eyes half closed, she grinned. "You always have the good apples," she said, climbing onto the chair. "I picked them myself," I said. "From the grocery store?" she asked, smirking. I didn't answer. Just slid the plate toward her and watched her eat like a bird, one bite from everything, finishing nothing. After breakfast, we sat on the porch with the puzzle she'd brought, a cardboard castle, half the pieces already worn soft from too much love. "I brought it," she said proudly, "because I wanted to do it with you." We worked slowly, no rush. The sun was warm on our knees. She asked questions, the kind only children ask when they feel safe. "Did you have friends when you were my age?" "A few." "Did they forget you too?" The question wasn't meant to wound. It was just curiosity, unfiltered and real. "Some did," I said. "Some stayed." She nodded solemnly, placing a corner piece. "I'll stay." I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just placed the next piece and let her words land softly inside me. By midday, we were sitting with lemonade and slices of bread spread with strawberry jam. She licked hers carelessly, like it might run away if she didn't keep up. "When do I get to come live with you?" she asked suddenly. I laughed. "Live with me?" "Yeah, like full time." I reached over and wiped a bit of jam from her chin. "You belong with your parents, sweetheart." She frowned. "But they yell, and they're always busy, and Mommy doesn't smile like you do." I didn't say anything to that. Some things aren't mine to correct. Some truths come out sideways. Instead, I said, "You'll always have a place here. Anytime. That's a promise." "Can I have a key?" That made me laugh again. "You can have two." In the afternoon, her father called. I saw the name flash on my phone screen, but let it ring out. Then a message came through. "Is she with you?" I texted back. "She is. She's safe. We're finishing a puzzle. I'll bring her home before dinner." No reply. Ellie noticed. "Are they mad?" I shook my head. "They're just surprised." She thought about that. "You surprise people a lot?" "Not as much as I used to." "Well, you surprised me," she said. "How?" "You're stronger than I thought." That stayed with me. When it was time to leave, I helped her pack her puzzle, her socks, the crumpled notes she'd scribbled while pretending to journal like Grandma. At the front door, she paused. "Can I come again next weekend?" "Of course." Then she hugged me, not the leaping kind. This time it was different. Slower, firmer, like she meant to hold on a second longer than necessary. Like she knew something had changed, and I think it had. It was her mother who showed up at my door. Not with Ellie, not with an apology, not even with a smile, just herself. Polished as ever, blazer too crisp for a Saturday, holding a takeout cup of coffee she didn't offer to me. "Hi," she said. "Do you have a moment?" I stepped aside, not out of politeness, just so she wouldn't stand there looking like she had the upper hand. She walked in like someone walking into a conference room, glancing at surfaces, scanning for details. I noticed how she avoided looking at the toys still in the corner, the puzzle box on the shelf. "I didn't expect you," I said, not offering tea. She smiled tightly. "Yes, well, neither did I expect my daughter to sneak out of the house and lie about where she was going." "She didn't sneak," I said. "She asked. You just weren't listening." That landed. Her mouth twitched, not in anger, in recognition. "She's been quiet all week," she said. "Refuses to talk about the visit, just keeps saying she wants to come back. She's welcome anytime. That's not the point, isn't it?" She sat down on the edge of the couch, still holding the coffee like it was a shield. "Look, I'm not here to argue. I know things have escalated. Jim's trying to give you space. I suppose I'm trying to uncomplicate things." I raised an eyebrow. "You revoked everything," she said plainly. "The accounts, the power of attorney, the will." "So he told you." "We share everything," she said quickly, too quickly. "Financially, we're dependent," I said, calm, direct. She looked at me then. Finally, not as a mother-in-law, not as a benefactor, as a woman. And in that moment, I saw something flicker. Not fear, not shame. Frustration. With me. With the fact that I'd stepped out of the role they'd written for me and stopped sticking to the script. "I didn't come to ask for the money back," she said. "I came to ask what you want." I didn't answer right away. I let the question sit. Then, respect. She nodded slowly, as if weighing it. "I've made a life for your family easier, for years, quietly, generously. And I've been thanked with distance, excuses, and neglect. I don't want interest on the money. I want acknowledgement. That I exist beyond my usefulness." Her eyes dropped to her cup. I continued. "When I showed up at that airport, I wasn't asking for praise. I was asking for presence. And none of you had any to offer." She stood up, restless now. "You think we're awful. I think you're self-involved and careless with people you assume will always be there." She crossed her arms. "You've made your point. Clearly." I didn't soften. "It's not a point. It's a boundary." We stood in silence. Then she said, "Ellie sees you as a refuge. That's because I am." She didn't disagree. As she reached the door, she turned back. "Do you still love him? Jim?" My throat tightened, but my voice didn't waver. "Yes," I said. "But love is no longer the same as permission." She nodded. Just once. Then left. I didn't watch her go. Instead, I returned to the table, opened my notebook, and wrote, "They only knock when the door is locked. They only look when you stop waving. They only listen when the silence gets too loud to ignore." He didn't call first. He never did when he wanted control over the conversation. Just showed up, like old times. Like the years when he still had a key and the habit of letting himself in without knocking. But he didn't have a key anymore. So this time, he knocked. I opened the door slowly. He was standing there in a jacket too thin for the weather, holding nothing, carrying everything in his face. The lines deeper, the jaw tighter, the eyes darting, like they hadn't found what they were looking for in weeks. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside. Inside, he looked around like the house had changed. It hadn't. He just hadn't seen it clearly in years. "I know you don't want to hear anything else," he began, "but I need to say this." "Then say it." "I messed up." I sat down, but didn't offer him a seat. He took one anyway, carefully, like a man easing into cold water. "I didn't mean to push you away. I didn't plan it. It wasn't some decision. Life just filled up," I said, "and I got edited out." He exhaled. "Yes." For a moment, the room held its breath. Then he looked at me. Really looked. Not like a son asking for something, but like a man facing a mirror he didn't expect to see himself in. "I was selfish," he said, "and lazy. I took your love for granted. I thought you'd always be there." I nodded once. "That's the problem. You thought I was wallpaper. I don't know how to undo that." "You can't," I said. "You just stop doing it." He was quiet. "You don't get to vanish and come back expecting the same seat at the table. That seat's been moved." He rubbed his hands together. "You changed the will." "I did." "To Ellie." "Yes." He nodded. "Good." That surprised me. "She deserves it," he said. "She sees you. She values you in a way I forgot how to." I believed him, not because of how he said it, but because of what he didn't say next. There was no request, no question, just the hollow space of reckoning. "Would you have done it," I asked, "if it had been her mother's mother?" He looked down. "I don't know." That honesty was the first real thing he'd said in years. "I wasn't just hurt," I said. "I was humiliated." He nodded slowly. "I had a bag full of gifts, a heart full of expectation, and I stood there while strangers got hugs and kisses and we missed you so much, and I got nothing." "I know." "No," I said gently. "You don't. But I'm glad you're trying." We sat in silence. Not the kind that bruises, the kind that binds. "I miss you," he said. "I miss who you used to be," I replied. He blinked fast, but didn't argue. Before he left, he stood at the door and asked, "Can I try again? I don't mean reset everything. I mean, build something new, slowly, with whatever you're willing to give." I thought about that. Then I said, "We'll see." And that was the fairest thing I could offer. The thing about rebuilding is that it rarely begins with grand gestures. It starts with small things, quiet things. A phone call returned, a question asked sincerely, a story retold without editing the pain. It doesn't sound like forgiveness. It sounds like weather shifting, something you only notice when the light falls a little differently on the floor. After he left, days passed. Not in silence. Not anymore. He sent one message each evening. Nothing dramatic. Just a line or two. "Saw daffodils today. Thought of your windowsill." Or, "Ellie told me she beat you at the coin game. I suspect cheating." I didn't always reply. But I read them. Everyone. Ellie came again that weekend. This time her parents walked her to the porch together. They didn't come in, and I didn't invite them. But I saw it in their posture. They understood now that entry had to be earned. Ellie ran into my arms like we hadn't just seen each other 6 days ago. "I brought something," she said, pulling a folded paper from her coat. "We had to write about someone strong." She handed me the page. The writing was crooked, full of corrections, but the words were hers. "My grandma is strong because she knows when to say no and when to say, 'Come in.' She knits and tells the truth and always makes you feel like your heart has a warm place to sit." I folded the paper carefully and put it in my notebook between the pages where I had written about arrivals and absences. That evening, she asked, Do you think Daddy will ever really say sorry? He already has, I said. But that's not the same as understanding. Will he understand? I don't know, I said. That's up to him, not me. She nodded, then pulled out the puzzle again. Sunday came, and she didn't want to leave. I could stay forever, she whispered as I buttoned her coat. I'd let you, I said. But you need to see if they've learned to listen yet. She kissed my cheek. Will you still be here next weekend? I'll always be here, I said. But one day you won't need me in the same way. I'll still want you, she said. That night, alone again, I reread her letter. And then, for the first time since Jim died, I wrote a new page in my journal that wasn't about loss. Today, I was remembered. Monday brought an envelope from the lawyer's office. Final confirmation. The trust was active, the documents settled, the changes recorded. I placed it in the same folder as the others, beneath the letter Ellie wrote, and above the one I'd written to no one in particular, the one about permission and boundaries. In the afternoon, I called Carla from the park bench, the one with the thermos and the sad songs. She sounded delighted. I was hoping you'd call. Do you still have that playlist? I asked. I do. Good, I said. I think I'm ready for a long drive. We met the next day at the edge of town. I brought sandwiches. She brought music and stories about her second husband, who was apparently nicer than the first, but worse at cooking. The highway stretched ahead of us like a ribbon waiting to be unraveled. I don't know where we're going, she said. Neither do I replied. And it felt right. We drove for hours, talked about our children, our regrets, our best recipes, the names we wished we'd given our daughters, laughed about the men who didn't deserve our best years, grew quiet when the mountains started. At one point, she turned down the music and said, Do you think it's too late to start again? I looked out the window. No, I said. But I think it's too late to stay silent. She nodded, and we didn't say much after that. We returned late, headlights sweeping the drive like old friends checking we'd made it home. The porch light was still on, automatic, but comforting. I thanked her, hugged her, and told her I'd come again. Inside, the house smelled like lemon and wool. Familiar and honest. I sat at the table and opened the leather notebook. Starting again doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means building something honest on top of what broke. It means remembering the pain without inviting it back in. Then, below that, I wrote one final line. I wasn't abandoned. I was delayed in being found. The invitation came in the mail. A real envelope, handwritten, not a text, not a last-minute call. It was addressed to me, full name, in Ellie's handwriting, letters large and hopeful. Inside was a folded piece of thick paper with stickers around the edges. Grandparents' Day at school, it read in colored markers. Please come to my class at 10 a.m. There will be snacks, and I want to show you my desk and my poem. I read it 3 times before setting it down. There was no mention of her parents, no apology tucked between the lines, just one child asking to be seen, to be accompanied, to be chosen. I called the school, confirmed I'd be there. Then I pulled out my nicer sweater, the blue one Jim always liked, and washed it gently by hand. Let it dry near the heater so it wouldn't lose its shape. The morning of the event, I left early. I took the long way there, past the bakery, past the corner store where they still smiled like I hadn't gone quiet for months. The air was cool, but not unkind, like a memory that no longer hurt. When I arrived, the school receptionist smiled and pointed me toward the classroom. Ellie was waiting at the door. She saw me, grinned, and waved like her whole heart was in it. "You came," she shouted. "I always do," I said. Inside, the desks were arranged in pairs, one for the child, one for the grandparent. Some children had no one with them. Others had two. But Ellie only looked at me, proud, certain, as if there was no other person she would have wanted. She led me to her desk. "This is my pencil," she said, holding up one chewed on the end. "And this is my book. And this," she said, pulling out a folded paper, "is my poem. I wrote it for you." She handed it over with both hands. I unfolded it slowly. My grandma is made of sky and soup and softness. She smells like tea and sounds like "come in." She sees me even when I'm hiding. She waits, but not forever. She is my safe. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because sometimes love is too full to spill. "Do you like it?" she asked. "I love it," I said. We sat through the rest of the class, hand in hand. I watched her raise her hand, laugh with her friend, open her juice box with too much force. I watched her be a child who knew she was held. Afterward, she introduced me to her teacher, to two classmates, and to a boy she said was kind of annoying but okay. Then she hugged me tightly before being pulled away by the swirl of children and goodbyes. As I walked out, I saw them, her parents, standing by the car. They didn't wave. I didn't go over. But as I passed, Ellie ran back toward me, arms open. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming, for always." I kissed her hair. It's where I belong. Back home, I folded her poem and placed it beside the trust papers, beside her first letter, beside everything I'd gathered in these months of remembering who I was. And that night, I made soup. Not because I was sad, but because it was time to feed something inside me that had been hungry too long. If this reminded you of something you felt, even once, then don't just scroll. Say it. To someone. To yourself. To the silence that's waited too long. We don't write these stories for sympathy. We write them so no one feels alone when the door stays closed and the suitcase stays by the wall, untouched. Because sometimes the story doesn't end with a reunion. Sometimes it ends with peace. It's been 4 weeks since Grandparents' Day. Ellie still calls every Thursday. No reminders, no prompts, just her, telling me about math tests and how she accidentally put glitter in her soup. Her voice doesn't carry guilt, just joy. And that's how I know we did something right. Jim's birthday passed quietly this year. I lit a candle, made his favorite potatoes, wore the sweater he once said made me look stubborn in a good way. Then I opened the journal and wrote, he would have understood, not the details, the decision. My son still writes now and then. His messages are humbler, no assumptions. He asks questions. He mentions things I once loved, small offerings, not as a plea, more like he's laying bricks for a road back, but letting me decide whether I'll walk it. I haven't answered yet. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. That's the gift of becoming someone who knows her own value. I kept the trust in Ellie's name. I kept the house in mine. The lawyer called last week and asked if I wanted to add anyone else as secondary. I said no. Not now. Because this home, this body, this voice, they were claimed too often without consent. It's time they answered only to someone who remembers how it felt to be forgotten. Carla and I still drive sometimes. No destination. Just two women who know the map changes once you stop living for everyone else's arrival times. We don't talk about our kids much, We talk about soup recipes and plants that only bloom in August, and what it means to still feel beautiful when no one says it out loud. The daffodils on my windowsill finally wilted. I didn't replace them. I let them curl, brown, and lean toward the glass. They lived their cycle. That was enough. Sometimes, enough is everything. If you've ever waited at a gate that never opened, if you've ever picked up the phone and no one called back, if you've ever given everything and been thanked with silence, then hear me now. You're not invisible. You are not a background character in your own life. You were never meant to be quiet forever. So speak.